This is the book that Republicans didn't want you to read. Hi, I'm Tom Mulaney, and welcome back to First Gen Professor, where we study how academia really works. In this episode, we're going to be talking about a bit of political controversy. So I wrote a book that came out a few years ago called The Chinese Typewriter, and it did well. It was on MIT Press. It got me involved in a lot of different areas of research. There'll be a sequel to the book coming out on MIT Press as well. There is a piece of the history of this book that almost no one knows. The book and my research was targeted by House Republicans back in 2014. So first, by way of background. When I was still an untenured professor, I was, like so many people in year 2 and 3, applying for grants like a busybody. One of the grants that I applied to, and which required a phenomenal amount of work, was the National Science Foundation grant, specifically the portion of the broader NSF funding umbrella that focuses on the social sciences and humanities. It required 2 revise and resubmits until finally, on the 3rd attempt, I landed the grant. I was kind of going about my work, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, back in 2014, I received an email from someone at Stanford University I had never heard of, a lawyer. Calm down, make sure you're kind of seated for what I'm about to tell you, and don't get nervous. But you're part of a dragnet of the congressional Republicans who every year try to stir up a lot of hoopla over what they perceive to be wasted taxpayer money.
But we have one creative federal government. According to a new report, it has quite the imaginations for spending your money. This is a shrimp exercising on a treadmill.
If you look at the lists annually of the kind of scholars and scholarship who tend to be targeted by these really kinds of political persecutions, they tend to be climate scientists. That, by and large, so many of those who have been targeted are working on questions of climate change and global warming. And the reason that they are kind of dragged into this nonsense is quite obvious. Big oil, the fossil fuel industry, lobbyists, general anti-science bent of the GOP, and of course, most importantly, climate change denial. And lo and behold, this lowly assistant professor working on the history of Chinese information technology was caught up in this dragnet. Gosh darn it, taxpayer dollars shouldn't go towards understanding the world in which we live. So I got this message, and it really freaked me out, of course. I mean, I didn't know what it meant. I didn't know if I was going to be on Fox News the next day. What the hell is this about? And, why am I being targeted for this? So I wanted to walk through this exceptional situation. This is not going to happen to, I would say, 99.9% of those watching, but when it does, there are some important things that you want to keep in mind. And so let's move through them. First, the question is what to do if you find yourself targeted politically for your scholarship. And I was targeted by congressional Republicans, but I know colleagues who work on other parts of the world who have been targeted by Hindu nationalists, by Japanese militarists and nationalists because of the subject matter that they're writing on. I know of colleagues who received threats and were subject to some just profoundly disturbing treatment online. So the question is, what do you do? Now, in my case, I was very fortunate because I found out about this by way of an office on campus. But what would I have done if I learned about it, just by the news or by receiving messages from journalists, which actually followed pretty quickly? I might have panicked. I certainly wouldn't have thought to myself, I should reach out to University General Counsel, because frankly, I didn't even know that such an office existed. Well, now I do, and I want to let you know that if this happens to you or something like it, the first thing you want to do is do not respond to any media inquiries at that point. The very first step that you want to make is to reach out to the chair of your department, if you're a grad student, to your advisor, to your dean, and possibly the Office of the General Counsel. And you just want to bring this to their attention. Maybe you can forward the email or forward something whereby you learned of this, and ask, I want to take cautious and steady next steps, and I just need some advice on this. You're going to get a rapid response, because this is an exceptional situation, and they don't want to see you hurt or dragged through the mud, and neither, of course, do they want to see their university or college dragged through the mud. So there is self-interest on their part as well. So the very first thing you do is reach out to a trusted senior colleague, an office on campus, and say, I need some tips on how to work through this. Now, this brings us to the second question, which is the inevitable contact by journalists. I was contacted by journalists within days. Had I not had a conversation with someone at my university, I think I may have just started jumping in and talking. Now, that's not necessarily bad, but what is risky about it is that I would not have thought in advance, A, do I want to do this? B, am I in a position to do this? Because remember, I was assistant professor at this point. I wasn't tenured. I was, always anxious about what the tenure process is going to be like, what influences it, how I might blow it, et cetera, et cetera. And then C, am I really prepared emotionally? Do I have the time to respond in some kind of substantive way to these things? Or do I want to place the responsibility with senior colleagues who are going to try to walk me through this process? That is a decision, and there is no right and wrong, but you do need to be deliberate about it, and you need to think it through. Because if you just jump on Twitter or Facebook, or start writing blog posts or start responding to journalists, you are announcing, maybe without intending to, that, okay, I'm in it. The time you can spend teaching or working is going to suffer, because you're going to be fielding these responses. It's going to do stuff to you emotionally, and I'm ready for that. So maybe you are, but if you're not, you need to think about this in advance. And you're not a weak person if you decide not to fight this fight. You're not a bad person if you don't stand up for this, because remember, this is not your fault. This is someone's kind of pathetic game. So the second point here is think through if and how you want to respond to this, and also field inquiries by media outlets. The third point ties to the second, and that is to remember at all points, this is not about fiscal conservatism, this is ideological. So when they come after you, or in this case they come after me, I know that they're not upset about the money. They're upset that I'm working on, in this case, China. I'm working on somewhere else in the world. If they're coming after these climate scientists who were well represented in the list of targeted research projects, they're not coming after them because of the money. They're coming after them because there is an ideological commitment to a kind of anti-science, anti-expert, and also anti-climate science bent. And that's what it's really about. So they use terminology like oversight. We want oversight of the research that the United States taxpayer pays, which sounds reasonable on the surface of it, but just remember that they're lying, that's not actually what the goal is. And the idea that, Republican Lamar Smith should in any way be deciding what is research worthy is simply wrong. So just always keep in mind that they're going to use language that sounds reasonable on the surface, but that underneath it there is an unmistakable ideological and fallacious argument. So let's come back to that book that for some reason congressional Republicans did not want to see written. Well, I'm pretty proud to announce, as some of my friends and colleagues know, that it won the top prize in my field. So I'm an historian of China. There is the American Historical Association, which is the largest professional body in the United States for historians, and that book won the John K. Fairbank Prize in East Asian history. Monetarily, it's a small prize, but it was one of the greatest moments of pride in my career thus far. I will never forget when I received that email. And so what I'd like to do here and now is I'd like to make a pledge. I would like to take a portion of the small prize money, and I would like to dedicate it to sending copies of the book for free to public libraries of your choice. So here's the deal. The first 5 people, let's make it 10, the first 10 people to leave a comment below listing their public library of choice, I will send a copy of the Chinese Typewriter, this dangerous book, to that library and say, if you're interested, please add this to your collection. It's yours gratis. In honor of of Republican Lamar Smith and of the ongoing war against peer review, against independent academic inquiry, and just basically anti-intellectualism in general. So this is dedicated to you, Lamar Smith. I don't know what it is that you had against me, but if you got something out of the video, if you feel a little bit more prepared in the 1 in a million chance that you will be targeted, please leave a like below and maybe a comment, and I'd love to see you in the next video. See ya!